orders of the day numbers 3 to 4.
Riccarton Racecourse Development Enabling Bill, second reading, and Riccarton Racecourse Bill, second reading.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Riccarton Racecourse Development Enabling Bill and the Riccarton Racecourse Bill be now read a second time. Mr Speaker, these bills are part of the government's both pragmatic and extensive response to New Zealand's housing challenges and will introduce a further 600 homes into the Canterbury market. I want to begin by thanking members of the Local Government and Environment Committee, particularly the Chair, Mr Scott Simpson, for the work that the committee is doing on a number of housing bills that are about addressing the very practical issues. Last night we passed through the legislation regarding home insulation and smoke alarms. We've got a big resource management amendment bill, and this bill is just part of these package of measures that the government is taking. I want to acknowledge the sensible refinements that the Select Committee has made to these two bills. Mr Speaker, the housing market in Christchurch is recovering well following the devastating Christchurch earthquakes in 2010 and 2011, and at the core of the government's response has been increasing supply. The rebuild has seen a number of very successful repair programs as well as new builds, and progress continues to be made to contribute to the residential recovery of the Christchurch and Canterbury housing market. The current pressure on the Christchurch housing market, and particularly the importance of the issue of more affordable homes, comes at a time that the Board of Trustees that governs the Riccarton Racecourse is proposing to convert part of the large racecourse into housing development to make better use of the racecourse's land to be able to support the racing club and industry as well. It is noteworthy that these bills are amending legislation that date back to 1878. In 1878, it was interesting to note in the parliamentary debate, the comment was made that the racecourse was too far out of town, that Christchurch would never expand this far, and that the area of land for it was questioned for some of those reasons. That was even before the motorcar had arrived in New Zealand. The Riccarton Racecourse Development Enabling Bill and this Riccarton Racecourse Bill effectively takes 40 hectares of that Riccarton Racecourse area with the support of the Raceways trustees and enable 600 homes to be built on those, and a condition of the government allowing that to occur is that at least 180 of those homes need to be within the Home Start KiwiSaver scheme and below that $450,000 price point. A total of 7 submissions were received on the bill, so I note the intervention from the member about the situation in Auckland, and I would say it is true that the situation in Christchurch has changed quite dramatically. That's because the government's program is working. In the last 12 months, rents in Christchurch have dropped by 5% in the last year, Mr Speaker. It's interesting to note that in Christchurch, actually house prices are absolutely static. The truth is, my colleague Matt Ducey would note that there are hundreds of good quality 3-bedroom homes, brand new, available for about $420,000. And that is because the Waimak Council has taken a very effective approach to issues of land supply. And I would invite members opposite, if they're interested genuinely in housing solutions for Auckland, to reflect on the government's program in Christchurch and the program that we have made, because actually it gives us a strong direction as to what the answer might be. Now, in the submissions that were received by the Select Committee, some submitters raised a concern about the loss of open space. While the bill does facilitate the loss of some of the reserve area, it is the government's view that actually that reserve space is not that well used. Truth, anybody who had been down there, is it really just to have many hectares of land effectively sitting underutilised when we've got families across New Zealand in need of additional housing, and that's why we say this bill is the right approach. It's interesting, Mr. Speaker, even after the loss of the area for housing from this reserve, it will be one of the largest racecourse reserves in New Zealand, with still over 82 hectares of land surprisingly close to the city centre for this racecourse. There were concerns that were heard by the Select Committee about the operation of the Riccarton markets, and I want to assure you, Mr. Speaker, that the Board of Trustees that administers the Racecourse Reserve has been working with the community and reserve users like the Riccarton market operators to ensure that that need can be met and to continue to provide the open public space for public use as well as racing activities, again emphasising the point that even with these bills, 82 hectares of public space remain. The Select Committee also heard some concerns raised about the suitability of the land for housing. I can assure the House that the bill ensures that this is a quality residential development, that the land, like so much in Christchurch, is suitable for housing, and in fact I would invite members who have concerns in that regard to look at very similar land surrounding it, which has proved eminently suitable for that purpose. Mr. Speaker, this bill is part of our Christchurch Housing Accord that we signed back in April 2014 to get on top of the housing issues in Christchurch. It included the Awatea housing development, and if anybody doubts the effectiveness of the government's Crown Land Program, I invite them to go to Awatea, see the hundreds of homes, good quality homes, coming on stream at an affordable price. I invite them to visit the developments that are occurring in both Wells Street and Colombo Street that will deliver 420 homes for that city. Mr. Speaker, yes, they're houses, and if Phil Twyford would bother to go to Awatea, he would see the success that this program is delivering. As, well, you know, this pathetic line from, it is pathetic, is that the member says that you're not allowed to use building consents as a measure of how much building activity occurs. Here's a simple challenge for him. Would someone spend $15,000 getting a building consent for a house if they weren't going to build one? Second point is, in all of the last 5 census, if you add up the number of building consents and you add up the number of houses that are actually built, there's a difference of less than 1%. Indicating it is in fact a very fair measure. Mr. Speaker, I do want to acknowledge the Board of Trustees of the Riccarton Racecourse. I want to acknowledge the Christchurch City Council. I want to acknowledge Ngāi Tahu, have worked very effectively together to be able to progress these bills and unlock this land for housing development in Christchurch. Mr. Speaker, I expect this to be the last phase of the government's necessary interventions to support the housing recovery in Christchurch. There were members opposite who questioned whether the government's housing response in Christchurch would work. I again draw attention to the House of the number of homes that have been built in Christchurch, the fact that rents over the last 12 months have dropped by 5%, the fact that house prices in Christchurch only increased by less than 1% in the last 12 months, indicating that the housing recovery in Christchurch is well on the way, but this further development of 600 homes at Riccarton Raceway will ensure that we complete the important work of the residential recovery of Christchurch from those devastating 2011 earthquakes.
The question is that the